welcome. I want to welcome all the members of the museum and thank you for attending this lecture, this artist lecture by Ted Waddell. Before we begin, I have some things that are appropriate, and I first want to thank the generous donors to the Petrie Institute of Western American Art, who helped support and helped us pay for this exhibition. Also, I want to thank the citizens who support the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District and those donors to the annual fund leadership campaign. And I also need to give a thank you to Ted Waddell, the artist, and this thank you is for being an artist that has been a joy to work with. And also a thank you to his wife, Lynn, who have just been charming and wonderful as I worked to develop this show, and they even put me up a couple of times in their home and allowed me to play around in his studio searching for artwork and going through drawers, and it was quite nice, and I thank them. And I also want to thank friends of Ted and Lynn and also family. Many of you in the audience this afternoon are friends or family of the artist or his wife, and we're glad to have you here for this special occasion. Now, I want to introduce the exhibition and Ted Waddell to you, and then I will sit down and be quiet and let Ted tell you all about himself. The exhibition, Theodore Waddell's Abstract Angus, explores the Contemporary Artist Angus series, which spans more than 3 decades of artistic production. His abstract paintings, drawings, and prints challenge the common perception that all Western American art is created in a realist style. Waddell was among many art students in the decades following the abstract expressionist movement to be challenged with the question of what's next. What will artists do next? Artists like Jackson Pollock, Robert Motherwell, and Clifford Still had dominated the art world. What would the next generation of American artists do? Gleaning elements from this art movement, Waddell returned to his native Montana. There he created works with abstract, flattened backgrounds that suggest subtle wanderings of cattle within the landscape. Decades as a rancher provided invaluable opportunities for him to observe the wide open spaces of the American West and to study the interplay between man, cattle, and land. By painting forms that are perceived as cattle in the snow-filled landscapes, the painter walks the line between abstraction and realism. Ted.
Good afternoon and welcome. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here and to have so many of you show up to hear my tales. Appreciate it. Before I start, I have some people I'd like to thank. If you go into the exhibition, you sort of see the result of a lot of activities by a lot of people. And so the exhibitions and collection team, all of these folks helped put this together. Mitchell Broadbent, Amy Barrett, Jill Desmond, Jacob Gailey, Libby Gottschalk, Kevin Hester, David Greichheimer, Lori Iliff, John Lupe, Sarah Melching, Bridget O'Toole, James Squires, Stephanie Skiles, Molly Wink, and Daniel and Bob, who are taking care of the audio and visual today. And it couldn't happen without them. And then without Thomas Smith, this wouldn't have happened. Thomas learned about me, or him, when he was at the Tucson Museum a number of years ago. And he was instrumental in helping to place one of my Motherwell Angus series of paintings in the Tucson Museum collection. And we've been working on this project now for 2 years or a little longer. And I heard him say, like he looked around in my studio. We also played a round of golf. He really hits a 5-wood very well. Anyway, I want to thank Thomas and Nicole Parks and Karen Brooks, who have just helped me along with every little detail, everything that could or needed to happen. And then the Petrie Institute has been incredible. And finally, Dr. Heinrich, the director of the museum. And I'm proud to be in this company. Before I start showing the slides, I wanted to introduce you to my family. For the first time in several years and time zones, all 4 of our daughters are here. So Barrett Campion is here from Salt Lake City. Ashley Campion is here from Portland. Erin Waddell is here from Sheridan, Wyoming. And Shanna Waddell, or Shanna Shelby, that's my daughter, is here from Boulder. Not only that, my granddaughter, Arya Jack Heineman, is here. And I want you to know that she's an author of 2 books already and is quite an artist. And the new addition to our family is Halia Shelby, who's 1 month old today. So, and then not the least of which is my partner, my friend, and my wife, Lynn Campion. Lynn is an author and has written 2 books. And she's also, for some of you who may know, she's the president of the Johnson Foundation here in Denver and has been involved with that for over 40 years. So with that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my background that made a difference, and then I'll start showing some visuals. There were 3 things that happened to me, and I didn't know this until, in retrospect. One is the love of the land, and I got that from being a native Montanan. I've been on that land all my life, pretty much. And now Idaho is also very important to me. So the love of the land started, and I didn't know this would happen either, but every piece that I do has a geographic reference to it. So if it's Monida Angus number 15, which is the big piece that's in the show, I saw that in Monida Pass between Montana and Idaho. The second thing that happened to me, and again, I didn't know that this would have such a profound influence on me, is the love of animals. I just can't imagine not being around them, and you'll see some of that when I start showing the slides. The third thing is the love of paint. I can't get enough of it, and some of that came from my dad. He was a painter, but he painted boxcars. So my first sensation of him was the smell of turpentine. And I can use it for aftershave. I mean, it's Anyway, I want to hopefully share with you some things that have happened to me along the way. And if it seems disjointed, well, cross your fingers, or I'll cross my fingers. And this is my wife, Lynn. She's an author and an accomplished writer. She's written 2 books, one on training the cutting horse, and the other a book called Rodeo. And that's her great horse, Woody. And I've done a lot of paintings and a lot of prints about Woody. This is our new addition. We have a cow. This is a cow named Margaret Thatcher. And when she had her baby, we called the baby Madeline Albright. The calf is about a month old now. This is one of our horses, a great Palomino named Sunshine. He was nearly a rescue horse, and he's just a love. This is me on a horse in the Bob Marshall Wilderness last year. This is a little white-tailed doe that I saw in the backyard at our place in Sheridan. So they're all around and they're close. This is out the studio window, bull elk, we get as many as 100 elk in the winter. And these are our dogs. We had four, and Barrett has one on the left. That's Ingrid. And so I tell people that I travel with an entourage, and this is it. And they're really funny, and so I started making sketches of them and whatnot, and it led to a book called Tucker Gets Tuckered. And they have it in the bookstore here. And Lynn and I have finished another one called Tucker's Seasonal Words of Wisdom. And we're working on a third book now about dogs and golf because we took up golf. And so there's some illustrations there that will be fun. And I had some putters cast in the shape of a dog foot. So it's just another day in paradise. This is Crystal. Crystal is about 12 years old now, and you can know how tall I am. I'm not very tall, but I could barely see over her back. She weighs about a ton. And we were in Switzerland, and I fell in love with them, so Lynn bought me Crystal for my birthday. So, of course, I had to get even with her, so I bought her a fire truck. Fourth of July. So this is the second book and what I was just doing is just making these illustrations and then writing notes in the illustrations. So this one was, for me, it was Tucker flunked Head Start. And Burner Pilates. And then this is one of the golf ones, the Millie and the Sand Trap, so it's Millie Plays Scratch Golf. And then instead of the Snoopy 2, we have Millie 2. And then the chicken, that's Hazel. She's the tour official, and she played on the Tyson Tour. And then here's Millie works, she's a model. She modeled for hood ornaments. And then Patty is the Swiss Tenor. He's the big dog. He weighs 135 pounds. And so what he does, he sends the ladies out, and if it's safe, then he goes out and then he howls sort of like a tenor. This is Finny, our great Maine Coon cat. And so here are the influences that move me. In any one place in Montana, I was once on a ranch where you could see 150 miles in any direction. And so that Great Plains has always resonated with me. And now, as well, the mountains in Idaho. And this would be in the mountain valley north of Moneida. And I've been over that Moneida Pass probably 300 times. I never get tired of it. I never get tired of seeing it. These are draft horses that are about 9 miles south, east of Arco, Idaho. And every time I go and see them. And they have their babies, and you watch them through the year. And so those things led to the paintings. I was in New York in 1962 and to 63, and that was when the abstract expressionists were in their heyday, and you could go to the Cedar Street Bar or the White Horse Tavern and see if you could find Franz Klein or one of those guys. I never found any, but I did study with one of those people at the Brooklyn Museum Art School. And because of Robert Motherwell, essentially, really at the core of what influenced me, I saw where he had done a series of drawings with oil paint, with house paints, and they were very lyrical, and they did a video of him or a movie of him where he was drawing these things, and they were on the floor. So when I got back to Montana, I thought, well, we started running cattle that resonated with me. So I did these drawings, and there's 8 of them in the exhibitions with house paints, and the paint was so thick that if you did them on the wall, it would run off of the wall. I mean, it was just drip onto the floor. This is over near the eastern part of the Bob Marshall Wilderness. I go and do painting trips. We have a horse trailer, and I put canvas and whatnot in and travel around for a week or so and stop and paint. So you can see how it goes back and forth. Like I said earlier, I have everything I do has a geographic reference. So if I say it's a Beaverhead Angus, it will mean that I saw what inspired me in that area, and it just I can't do anything without seeing it. I'm not one. I use photographs mainly for light, but I'm not one that can depend on photographs or somebody else's information for what I do. Some artists can do that and do it well. I just can't. I need to see it again and again and again. And this is looking south towards the Spanish Peaks, west of Bozeman. This is one of the pieces that's very similar. I have two pieces in the lobby at the Four Seasons, and this is one out of that series. Could be one. It could be one of those. I don't know. I'm not really good at keeping records. And these are works on paper. I do works on paper in which I use. It's all oil paint. I don't know how to do watercolors. I'm really lousy at watercolors, and so I use oil paint and graphite, and then a wax medium called a cold wax medium. I call it encaustic just to make it simpler, but it's not. And so I do these. Something like this would be 30 by 40 inches. This is a woodcut. I'm doing woodcuts now with a young printmaker who does all of my edition work. I have a big press in my studio, so he comes over and does the edition work. And what we're doing with these is quite different than a traditional woodcut. Most woodcuts traditionally are pretty dense, and they don't use a lot of color. This one involves, I think, 17 different blocks. And what we're doing is using a lot of transparent base and very little pigment, so they're just layers and layers and layers, and then we proof them on Mylar, and then put them between two pieces of plastic and put them up on a stand, and shine a light through the back, so you can see what you need to do and change it if you need to. And it's been very exciting. We're working on one now that has 21 or 22 blocks already, and I think it's going to end up with another 10 or 12. This is a hand-colored lithograph. I've been doing prints all my life, all my adult life, and people ask why, and I do it because you can learn more about color and about paint by doing prints than anything else, because what happens in the case of the woodcuts and the monotypes and whatnot, when the print goes through the press, it goes through at 600 pounds per square inch. So it's the only way that you can put that small amount of pigment on a piece of paper. And when I first started, they said, oh, I was really suited for monotypes, so I'm putting all of this thick paint on. It was absolutely bad. And so I printed in San Francisco at Experimental Workshop for about 25 years. And now I print either at home with two printmakers, these two young people, or I print in Kansas City at Lawrence Litho. This is about 6 feet square painting. This is that sunshine horse you just saw. Ashley asked me here a while back, or asked Lynn a while back, that, you know, what good were these horses that we didn't do anything with? And I didn't have the sense to tell her at the time, but this horse has made me a lot of money because I've painted it a lot. This is in southwestern Montana, north of the Monaida Pass. And this is called Monaida. This piece is 10 by 18 feet. I started doing these bigger pieces. There was a painter called John Ferry who painted in the West in the 19th and early 20th century, and he was painting 6-foot square paintings when Bierstadt and others were working on 24 by 30s. So after 100, 150 years, I got to thinking, well, somebody else ought to paint on a large scale just to follow up. So I started to do these. I've done probably 6 or 8, and somebody asked me what happens to them, and I said, well, they go directly into storage. And they do. This is also 10 by 18 feet. This is a spot south of Sheridan and north of Twin Bridges, and I love this particular area because of the way the landscape moves into the mountain shapes. It's just a wonderful kind of layering that's fascinating, and it changes daily as the light changes and the seasons change. Yep, there's my granddaughter. This is a series that I did in the early 80s that were almost companions to the Motherwell influenced drawings, and these are just cloud landscape pieces I did on a ranch west of Billings, and this is where you could see 150 miles, so it all had to do with a lot of clouds and not much landscape. This is about 6 feet square. I'm really lucky in that I have people working for me who make it possible for me to do a lot of things. And so the young fellow, Luis, does all of my canvas stretching, he does all of my framing, he does all of my crating, he does all of my shipping. And so I have at any one time probably upwards of 100 canvases at various sizes ready to go. So all I have to do is go decide on a size and go. And so he's made my life really, really great. He's a lovely young guy. This is another. These are about 20 by 26. This is a piece that I did in about 1981 or so, and that has just been acquired by the Booth Museum in Georgia for the permanent collection. It's 3 by 4 feet. And these are companions to the pieces that Thomas picked for our show here. And again, something I didn't know would happen is if I said that this was something else, you might say, what? But if I say it's Angus or cows, then I think you tend to help fill that in. You make it complete by saying, oh yeah, maybe not. It's a nice theory, though. But you see, if you see this, and then you see this, you might say, well, maybe. Either that, or that guy can't draw worth a rib. And some have told me that the reason I paint the way I do is that my eyes are poor. It could be true, too. This is one of the Motherwell series. I'm not so sure this isn't in Tucson. And these are all about 6 feet square. I seem to like nearly a square format. This is about 4.5 by 5, somewhere in there. I did a big piece, a big diptych that was in a show in New York, and this guy bought it, and his apartment was too small for him to put it all up in one, so he put it at right angles in the corner. That was a great solution. Besides, I needed the money. These are works on paper that are on black paper. I learned about black paper from a wonderful artist in the Bay Area, Raymond Saunders. He's just absolutely terrific, and this was in the early or to mid-'80s, and he and I were in the same gallery, and so I used to see him fairly often, and he was quite a character. He would show up in a full-length mink coat, I mean, Wow. And then we were in a show in Washington, D.C., and he went into the show, and he was always working on his painting. So he went into the museum where they hung this work, and he got out his little kit, and he started working on the paintings. They just freaked. And our dealer said, "How bad was it?" And the thing, too, that's interesting about this is your whole brain has to change, you know, because everything's the opposite of what you think. So it's just that back and forth thing. It's fascinating to me. It's about 1980, 81, 80, I don't know, somewhere in there. This is Tobacco Root Mountains near Sheridan, and that's a fairly good-sized piece. It's like 90 by 144, somewhere in there. This is a painting that I did up out of Sun River. I have a poet friend, Paul Zarzycki. He's a cowboy poet, and he was publishing a set of poems, and so I did this piece specifically for his book. So it's a diptych so that it divides on the spine of the book. And another nice thing, too, in our part of the world, over near the Idaho, I don't know, they call it something else, but it's where they developed the stealth bomber and atomic things, and that's over near Arco. And it's the last stand, as I understand, it's the last stand of native sage in the United States, and I think it's some 800,000 acres. So you go along, and there are no fences, and you'll go along, and you'll see a band of sheep, like 1,500 sheep, just out there. It's just marvelous. This is a piece of sculpture that I did a number of years ago. It's 9 feet high and 8 or 9 feet long, weighs 1,600 pounds, and it's out in our pasture. So I've been doing sculpture off and on. I mean, I started in sculpture, and I taught sculpture at the university many years ago, and so I've always sort of continued. This is a big wood dog, you know, so it's a big wood dog. I traded for cabins, a bunch of cabins, so I have all of these beams, and so my guys that work for me, I just point and they put them together. I've also been doing trophies and other kinds of things. This is called diamondback trout, so I did a whole bunch of... And I'll be doing a show next year at the Yellowstone Museum in Billings that we think will tour, dealing with these trophy kind of pieces as well as some gun pieces. I've been working on this series for about 25 years, and most of it has never been shown. The thrust of that is that we have, as you know, we have these discussions that get rather testy in whether or not you should own a gun or use a gun or whatnot. And I believe that the only way we can deal with that is not with fact, but with fiction and humor. So that's what a lot of these are about. This is a dryland trout made out of straw. And this is a horseshit trout. I was in a show, had this up, and the Trout Unlimited people got so mad they tore it off the wall. Needless to say, it's still in my collection. And then these are cow trophies. Again, they came off of my ranch experience where I started finding these bones and things and just started doing them. I don't know why. And this is one of the gun pieces. It's a jawbone of a cow, and then it's covered with pearls, and then has 45 shells taped to it. So, of course, it's a pearl-handled 45. And this is a tumbleweed ladder. I don't know where it came from, but I was going to be in a show at the museum in Spokane, and I was in a hurry, so I got my pickup, and the wind was blowing pretty hard, so I didn't take bags. I just went out along the road, and I gathered up all of these tumbleweeds and stuffed them in the passenger side of my pickup. So I'm on my way home, and my neighbor stopped. You know how you stop and visit in the road? You roll down your windows and stop. And we were talking. We got done talking, and he looked and he said, when the wind blows, you ought to roll your windows up. And that's all he said. This is a stainless. I was influenced, as everybody who made sculpture was influenced by Donald Judd, and it was a major influence when I was in grad school. So I did a lot of stainless pieces, and we still have this one. And then this was a slide for children, and I made it in such a way so that if they got up on the top and they fell or whatnot, they would fall away from hurting themselves. And then this was a teeter-totter, and those are my kids on that. So you know how long ago that was. This was a piece that's still on the campus at Eastern Montana College in Billings. It's 24 feet high, and that was a funny story. I had to mortgage my pickup in order to finance it, and it took me 18 months to pay off my pickup, so I lost a fair amount on that deal. But I'm glad I did it. This is about 12 feet high. I think this is in the collection in Billings. I don't remember. And so this brings me to the present. Thomas asked me if I wanted to, he had renovated the space upstairs, and he asked me if I wanted to do something special for that space, something big. I said, sure, what do you want? So this is, I think, 7.5 by 26 feet. And in so doing, these brushes, like the one you see up in my hand, they're made from bigger brushes that they use to apply tar before you put roofing on. And you put a lot of stuff on them. I mean, you can put a lot of paint on them. And they make a mark, but they also make a texture because the bristles are like a broom. And now I think I learned from John Singer Sargent how to load a brush, because he would, I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100%, but he would put more than one color on it. So then when he made that stroke, that's the only way you can do that. So I've been loading brushes, big time with this stuff. So, and on this painting, I kept track. I used 18 gallons of white and about 16 quarts of color and 18 or 19 gallons of turpentine. This is my palette. My palettes are 4 by 8 feet, and they're on rollers so I can move them around. I buy my paint by the quart and by the gallon in San Francisco. And we did for this take pictures. Not very well, but I did it, and Lynn helped me with that, of the painting as it progressed. It's something I've never done, so that they have it here. I haven't really looked at it, but it may be helpful to the education department. We don't know, or not. So that's the final product. So, with that, I would take questions. Oh, yeah, if anyone has a question, they can go to the mic if they like, or we'll move them around, I guess. That works. Yeah, go ahead.
What size editions do you do of your prints?
The question was, what size editions do I do of my prints? I was talked in one time to doing 150. We'll never do it again. My notion of a print is not an offset process, but the traditional like lithography process, where the most you can get out of a lithography activity is about 70 to 75. We're now printing 40 or 50 tops, and I just don't want to do any more. A lot of artists will do what they call glissé prints, but to me they're not really prints. They're posters that are worth about $15 a piece, and they'll print them into the gazillions. And then if you use offset lithography process, you can print any number. If you look at an artist like Bev Doolittle, I think they print 5,000 just for openers. I'm not interested in that. I like the idea that it has a finite and traditional base to its activity. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just love your work. I've got actually two questions. The first would be, how long would this take, your painting? And the second is, when I look at your the mother well upstairs, the one the Denver Art Museum owns, it looks like the cows are below the surface of the painting. It looks like that you put them down first and then build up over them. I'm just curious as to the technique you use.
Well, first of all, this painting, this big painting was started in October and finished about a month ago, or maybe less. It was almost wet when it left Haley to come here, and we had to pack it in a way that wasn't as good as we would have liked, but we did get it here. So it took 6 months. And one of the things that I've learned to do as I've gotten older is not to try to take on so much. If you take on so much, then conceptually it can tip you over, and then it's 10 times as hard to complete that work. So I try to be careful about how much I do. And then on this particular painting, I've learned a ton about viscosity. So some days I would use 3 quarts or a gallon of paint, and the next day I would use washes over the top of the wet, something I've never done. And then if I didn't like them, now I'm using squeeze bottles of turpentine. So you spritz it and get the intensity of the wash to change, and you go back and forth. And then with these big brushes, and I'm also using masonry trowels that are about this long, when you make a mark and the surface is uneven, it hits some places and it doesn't hit other places. And that's fascinating to me. Now, with the mother wells upstairs, I guess I'd have to look at it. Probably you're right. Probably the black was done first and this was done around. Now it happens back and forth. And I mean, if you look at when you see the painting upstairs, you'll see some places where the black looks like that I put a lot of white on and then mixed it up with it, and I did. And so it was back and forth that way. Anyway, yeah. Yeah.
Do you do any underpainting with acrylics and then go into?
No, I don't. The only thing that I use that's water-based is gesso. I don't like acrylics at all. No. There's only one painter I've ever seen that could really make a great painting with acrylics, and that's Jim Wade. And if you're at Palett's restaurant on the wall behind the entrance, or some Jim Wades, he's terrific. But I've never seen anybody else that could do it well. I don't know. I haven't cleaned a brush in 40 years, so I never clean them. If they wear down, they get really bad. I toss them, but I don't toss them any, so they're stiff and gnarly and whatnot. But it's all turpentine, you know.
How are you retrofitting those tar brushes?
Retrofitting?
Well, are you taking them and making them your own, or do they come
Well,
like that?
the brush that you saw, they come and they look like this, and there's 3 segments, so it's like 6 inches. So I have my guys cut them in thirds and drill the holes and put dowels in them, so they become brushes. Some of them we just put a dowel in, and I'm putting paints on 6 inches of brush. It makes a big stroke. Yeah, it's fun. It takes about a pint of paint or more for each stroke. It's great fun.
Could you talk a little about the color of snow?
The color of snow. Well, people think it's white. It isn't. Yeah, it's sort of like the color of grass. People think it's green. It isn't. I don't know. I've always, I guess most of my painting for many, many years was done in the winter. An artist friend named Bill Stockton, he ran sheep over at Grass Range. He used to call January and February the aesthetic months because during that time period on the ranch, you're just maintaining and keeping the animals alive. And then in the summers, none of us had time to to paint. So I suppose I spent the last 30 years trying to understand green, and not very successfully. But white to me has a lot to do, maybe everything to do with the light. You know, what time of day and what's going on with it. It's fascinating to me. And again, as soon as you think you understand it, it changes and you're back to square one. Sage is the same way. If you look at sagegrass, it's sagebrush, you think, oh yeah, that's just burp. But it's not. It really is difficult to understand. But it's a good effort. I love trying. I'm not sure.
Changing your whites with different manufacturers. You know, there's whites are so different depending on the manufacturer. Are you changing those up?
I'm using I buy my oil paint. The whites come in gallons, and I buy it from a factory called Triangle Paints or Triangle Coatings in San Francisco. And I found out about that company in about 1980, and Diebenkorn bought his paint there. So I bought paint from them bought forever until they closed. And when they closed, I bought everything they had in their store. So I have been using the same white for that long, and then I mix it with turpentine and pigment. It turns out right now that, and I would have never thought this was a possibility, is a combination of cadmium orange and manganese blue that with white in it. And you say, what? And I don't know how I came upon it. But the thing that's nice about it is that when you do some of that stuff, if you lean towards the orange, then it leans in that direction without dominating, or you do it the other way. I mean, it's terrific. So I just use the same stuff I've been using forever. Yeah, sure.
Could you go back 2 slides and just kind of talk about what you did to get to that point where the picture's taken?
Right here, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, see, I don't do any preliminaries. I don't do any studies. I just start. And I usually start with wash drawings. And again, the way I manipulate those is I will put, say if I started that and you look at the top over there by that ladder deal, you can see where it's dripping down, running down. Well, I'll start and then really hit it with turpentine. So it changes the whole thing. In fact, if you go upstairs and look at the Motherwell, there's a tan Motherwell painting, a big one, in that show. You can see where he's done some of that stuff. Well, he did it in a better way than I did, but anyway, that's how it starts. And then as it comes along, the things begin to emerge.
So did you paint it white, then spray it, then you added cows and sprayed it? Is that what you did?
No, it's gessoed. There are 4 coats of gesso on it. That's how I start, and so it's white to start with, and then I start doing these washes on it with various kinds of things, and it sort of accumulates, and then soon then you start adding color in a heavier fashion. So you go back and forth. So some places you'll see raw canvas almost, other places you'll start to see a real amount of paint. And so I go back and forth. And that whole thing accumulates. And I can stand up close and do that, paint that way, and people look at it and say, if I'm standing close, I don't understand what you're doing at all. And yet I can stand back and see more clearly what I'm doing. And one of the things I've discovered here in recent years, in a way, is that the more abstract something seems, the more real it becomes. And I don't know why, but that sort of thing's happening. Sure.
So I'm curious about your background, that you have lived in I don't know if you were operating a ranch at the same time you were painting. and how you divide your time up to do that? And did you always intend to be a painter, or did you intend to be a rancher? How did that happen?
I started college almost by accident. Some of my friends were going to go down and register, so I went with them and got started. And in very short order, I met a wonderful painter named Isabel Johnson. Isabel taught college in Billings, and she was also a rancher on the Stillwater southwest of Billings, and her father had homesteaded that place. So she was a rancher painter. And within 3 weeks or a month of the time that I met her, I decided I didn't want to be alive and not make art. And that was well over 50 years ago. I have the same passion that I had then. I just can't do it as much, but the passion is still there. And I don't want to be alive and not paint. And then I went away. I did my graduate work at Wayne State in Detroit, and then I taught at the University in Missoula for 8 years. And I always thought that the teacher-student relationship was a contract, and that if one person wasn't holding his end up in that activity, he or she should leave. In this case, it was me. It wasn't the kids, it was me. So, and then in a perverse way, I always wanted to get tenure and quit, so I did. And there was an opportunity to take over a family ranch west of Billings. So we were on that ranch for 11 years. It was 4,500 acres, and we had 200 mama cows, 150 head of sheep, and we farmed 1,000 acres and hayed 1,000 acres. And what I did is, again, mainly in the winter. And then my favorite time was calving, because when you're calving heifers, you have to get up every 2 hours. So I would get up at 2 and check the heifers, and then go to paint. And so a lot of days by 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, I'd been painting for 7 or 8 hours. I did that at that ranch, and then we had a ranch up on the Muscle Shell northwest of Billings and had 60 cows, and painted more. And then Lynn and I, when we were first married, we had a little ranch west of Belgrade. And by that time, in the early days, the art paid for the cows, or the cows paid for the art. In the later days, the art paid for the cows. So it went one way and then the other way. And I don't have any major responsibility for cows now. We have pairs that we run in the summer, but not a lot. I'm what you'd call a nickel-plated farmer now. I just get to enjoy them. So, did that answer your question? Okay. Yeah, sure.
The world of abstract expressionism is so completely at odds with realism and the traditions of Western art. How do you marry that in your head?
Yes, that's a good question. Well, the question is the juxtaposition of realism in Western art to abstract expressionism. And I sort of think that in a way, because of what has happened to me, I always feel like, in some ways, very grateful that I'm almost the next. We had, in Montana, I was a kid, and I was privileged to know almost all of the great artists in Montana. There weren't that many, and so I got to meet Bob DeWeese when I was 17, and knew a lot of those people. And so, in a way, I was positioned. They were like my art uncles. That's what my daughter calls them. And so, these people guided me. I taught with Rudy Audio for 8 years, which was an absolutely incredible experience, and we were friends for over 40. And I think, too, what happened to me is that I came out of grad school doing competent sculptures influenced by Donald Judd. In fact, I don't think anybody has surpassed that influence in 50 years. Prior to that, it was the British, and then David Smith was my big hero as far as a sculptor. So I came out of school doing that, and it made sense. We lived north of Missoula in a little valley. So the scale on human scale, 16, 20 feet was fine. Okay, when you get to the ranch where you can see 100 miles, those things seem silly. So one of the things I did is I went back to painting, because in painting, it's like it's something you agree to. You agree to the illusionistic notion of what that is. Sort of like going to a movie. When you go to a movie, you go in and you buy into that activity. Say, okay, I agree. Well, you do that when you look at paintings. Well, that combination between that and the abstract expressionists who insisted that canvas, this is in fact a canvas, somehow I think I was able to meld that together. And again, the first pieces that I did on that ranch were very hard edge looking drawings of the horizon. All there was sky and horizon. And then because of the cows, and again, then you get into this tactile thing. So, everybody eliminated that when Judd showed up, and then the hard edge people. But prior to that, one of the great influences was Henry Moore. I mean, because you just feel that. So I think what happened to me is, first of all, those things, and then they just kind of went together. I don't know. Other than that, maybe you do. But that's the only way I can come to it, I think. And again, I was positioned at a time in Montana when those things were going on. Like Thomas and I have talked about the Poindexter collection, and the Poindexters had a big gallery in New York, and they brought paintings out, modern paintings, to Montana at a time when most people from Roundup and Miles City had never seen a modern painting. And so it was a big influence, and it's still around. It's still alive and well. And I think some of that, again, seeing those things changed me. Yeah.
One last question
Yeah.
to wrap up. I think there's someone in the back.
Sure.
First of all, I want to thank you for coming. It's so nice to have you here, Ted. We appreciate it. And my question is more of a surface treatment question, because you mentioned something about encaustic.
Yeah.
And also a cold wax
Yeah.
process. And I just was curious if you could explain how you manage some of the wonderful effects that you get with your art.
Well, I use the term encaustic as a way I describe my paintings, but that's not accurate. It's just shorter than saying cold wax medium. Mm-hmm. I use a product called Dorland's Wax Medium. It's a petroleum-based product that I get from Daniel Smith in Seattle, and it's the consistency of Crisco or whipped honey. And I mix pigment with it, and then to make it permanent, I use Damar varnish. So when you apply this to a surface, then it becomes permanent. And part of the reason I did that, and I've been using it about 20 years now, is that I think that painting is like our history. It's cumulative. And so I like to see the marks as they accumulate. And by using this cold wax medium, you can make a mark which becomes new, but you also can see what's underneath it. In recent months, I've stopped using it because I've learned so much about this new kind of thing that I'm doing with bigger brushes and different kind of surfaces and different viscosities. I've learned a ton about viscosity from doing this big painting. But that's basically it. I have tried encaustic over the years, but it never really resonated with me because of heat. Although it's one of the most durable forms of decoration in ever. I mean, the Egyptians used it 7,000 years ago. And when you look at people like Jasper Johns, who caused a renaissance, I mean, it's amazing. But anyway, I don't, in the strictest sense, I don't do that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ted. That was wonderful. You're in for a treat. Ted and I have prepared 30 years worth of cows for you. And we hope that you will all come up to the preview. The exhibition is in the Gates Western Galleries, which is on the second floor of this building. So you have a choice to take the elevator just outside the auditorium here up to the second floor, or you can take the stairs up 2 flights to the Gates Gallery. And I hope that you will all come up to see the exhibition. Thank you.